Let me begin by saying thank you for coming. What we're basically going to talk about today is about scores and predicted grades. In normal times, what we focus on at IBSchoolImprovement.com is to increase participation and performance in the IB. We know for a fact that the number one indicator of bachelor degree attainment is the rigor of your high school curriculum. And we believe that the International Baccalaureate offers the most rigorous high school curriculum for students. So we believe that our goal is to get more kids to access the IB and to perform better. And that's what we do basically in normal times. Unfortunately, we do not live in normal times right now. So what we're going to do is kind of dive into this. And what I want to begin with is a question. And so what I'd like you to do is consider, how do you award predicted grades right now? What is your process that you are beginning for those grades for the May 2020 session or May 2021 are due April 20th? So how do you do that? And just take a moment and reflect on that. Okay. So as Sean pointed out, during this presentation, we're going to have pause points where you can basically engage in questions, comments, and discussions. You can either do that through chat, or you can do it if you're comfortable, just unmuting yourself and raise your hand and asking questions, and we'll try to clarify that. So let's begin. The goals for this presentation: number one, how is IB going to award scores for May of 2021 and developing an understanding around that? Understand the role and significance of the predicted grades in those scores. And then number three is how to use this knowledge to better support students in these difficult times. So those are the goals. So let's begin, and let's start with what we can learn from May of 2020. What can we learn from last year that helps inform this year? IB communicated two things with absolute clarity in how they awarded scores in May of 2020. Number one is the value of the internal assessment for any subject. The internal assessments are extremely important. It is really important to review and engage in learning around how IB scored them and reflect on this practice of how to do better. One of the I don't think there are good things that came out of this, but one of the things is, since all our IAs are being scored by examiners, you can get those IAs back after the examination session through an inquiry upon result and engage in learning around those IAs. So, so I'm apparently, okay, so that's not me. Okay, cool. So reflect around your IAs. Number two, our predicted grades are extremely important, and we're going to talk about that. Are your predicted grades in alignment with IB, and have they been? Because that is going to be extremely important for May of 2021. And number two is, how do you award those predicted grades, and how do you bring them in greater alignment with IB? And number three, I think many teachers engage in this discussion around predicted grades that I do not want to award my predicted grades too high. I do not want to award them too low. They look at it as a judgment of themselves as teachers. And what we're gonna find out is that now the predicted grades are extremely important for our students. Okay. What we know about May 2021. IB has communicated that there are now two paths for awarding scores in May of 2021. And the path must be consistent across the school. You cannot go in some sort of hybrid of using one path and then the other. Schools that have students in the building can give exams based on the reduced curriculum. So the curriculum reductions that were announced in August of 2020 will be the basis of those exams. In addition, those curriculum reductions will continue through the 2021-2022 school year. So for those of you, for your juniors, they're going to continue to engage in the reduced curriculum. All internal assessments will be scored by IB examiners. So while you may have scored your internal assessments, there will not be a moderation process as there has been in the past. Instead, the process will be, as it was in May of 2020, that all internal assessments will be scored by IB examiners. Scores will be awarded based on modified grade boundaries, meaning that the students will not be held to the same standard before. And for courses that have had limited curriculum reductions, such as the math courses, your grade boundaries will be significantly more lenient. So scenario one only applies if you have students in your building and you can give exams to all of those students. Scenario two, schools that do not have students in the building or are in some sort of hybrid model will not give exams. For example, my school, about half of our students are currently in the building and half are not. Because of that, we are not going to give exams. Again, all the internal assessments we scored by IB examiners. They're not going to use your scores. They're only going to use the scores of those internal assessments as graded by IB examiners. Scores will be awarded based on a combination of internal assessment score and the predicted grade. So basically, there will be a formula for each subject where the internal assessment is weighted between 20 to 40%, and the predicted grade is weighted 60 to 80%. And that will yield an out of 100 score as it has been in the past. And those out of 100 scores will be converted to the 1 through 7 score. Couple of notes here. The predicted grade, if you predict a student at a 4, the student will receive the percentage that will be the highest end of the 4 band. So you're going to get a 4 gets the top of the 4, a 5 gets the top of the 5, the 6 gets the top of the 6. So there is a benefit of the doubt that IB is giving those students. Under either model, regardless of what you're doing, IB is going to examine how you awarded predicted grades, and basically they're going to provide you with an allotment of predicted grades based on past predictions. Okay, so what does that mean? If you are giving exams or not, you will have to go through this process. What does this mean? Based on historical performance of your school, IB will provide you with an allocation of predicted grades based on the number of students enrolled in the subject. This allotment will not be based, they're not going to use May of 2020. They're going to use 2019, 2018, and 2017 to indicate your past ability to predict accurately. You will be given X number of 7s, Y number of 6s, Z number of 5s, etc. Schools may award less or lower predictive for each grade, 7 through 1. They may not award more or higher. This is the important point. Schools may ask for a review-based exception. That means that either you can say, I have particular students that are not in line with past performance, or one particular year or 2 years of your past performance are not indicative of your school performance. To ask for those exceptions, you're going to need to understand how IB reaches their conclusions to make the argument, because they're going to ask for data to support those exceptions. And that's what we're going to talk about a little bit later. Schools that are new. So if you did not give exams in 2019 or before, or subjects that are new, meaning like you just started teaching economics HL, you will not receive an allocation. Instead, you will receive guidance based on previous examples of new schools and previous examples of new courses. So how does it work? Based on historical performance of 3 years, not including 2020, IB will go back and look at the number of 7s, 6s, and 5s down the line that you have been awarded. In this example, historically, this school awarded, and these are done by subject specific, awarded 11, they had 11% get 7s, 21% get 6s, 32% get 5s. Fine. Then IB asks how many students are currently enrolled in that subject. So if there are 30 kids, it would be 3.16 is 11%, 6.32 is 21% of that 30. IB will round all of those numbers up. So in this case, for those 30 students, this course will be allotted 4 7s, 7 6s, 10 5s, 7 4s. You can award less and you can move them down. You can award only 3 7s. You cannot award 5 7s without asking for an exception. So what it looks like is this. Those are the predicted grade numbers, and I'm an IB history teacher. These are my distributions that are available. For my current students, I only have 1 allotted 7. I have 26 allotted 6s. I have 89 allotted 5s. So when I do the predicted grades for my 189 candidates, I can only award 1 predicted 7. The only way around that is to ask IB for an exception. And we're going to talk about how you do that. But that was a lot. So what I want to do is pause here for questions, thoughts, and discussion.
Then there was a question in the chat. So basically the question was, do they have to award based on that allocation only? And then when is IB sending that their allocation to everybody? Like, when is that available?
The allocations are, I know my allocations are currently available in IBIS. So you can see what the allocations are currently. What was the other part of the question?
So yeah, some other people are saying that they've received theirs as well. The other question was, so they have to award based on, they have to award this based as like that is the allocation. They've got to like abide by that unless they, like if they want to go off of that script, they essentially have to provide documentation to IB that allows them to go off script then.
As I understand it currently, the only way to go above your allocation is to ask for an exemption. And there are two ways to ask for exemptions. One is to say that you have students who are particularly different than previous years. And number two is to say your past performance is not indicative of present performance. And both ways you do it, you're going to have to do it based upon the data. So IB has your data, you're going to have to speak to them back in data language. I see there's a question about like the English and math predictives. So let's deal with English first. English, they say the curriculums are close enough that the allocation process works for English. So they're going to give you an allocation based on your previous scores, because their argument is that the English curriculum, even though it changed, is similar enough to use that data. For math, they have said the HL classes, those are similar enough that they will engage in that same process. For the SLs, for Math Studies SL, and for Math SL, they say those courses are different enough that in their statistical analysis, they will take that into account for those allocations. But probably if the only place to kind of make those kind of curricular arguments would be in Math SL and Math Studies SL.
All right, there was another question. Go ahead. Yeah, Marson just asked, is a change of teacher indicative of or for an exemption? So a different teacher equals different results that won't follow past year's data.
Like, I believe that would be grounds for an exception for teacher changes, because again, we're not using the May 2020 distributions to create the allotment, because the argument goes that May of 2020 was an outlier year, so they're not using May of 2020. They're using May of 19, May of 18, and May of 17. And I think teacher turnover, also changes that you made to curriculum or how you approach the exam, would be appropriate to discuss why you could get an exemption. Okay. Anything else?
T put something in the chat. I'm not sure if it was a question or just a statement, so I'll read it and then we'll let you respond, and then I think we're good. But basically, for subjects with less than 5 candidates, the historical distribution does not seem to apply.
I try to explain how they're approaching it. Their argument goes that the number is not significant, that it is based upon past performance, and what they want is to have fairness across the board, and they believe that this does that. I'm not going to say any agreement or disagreement with that. I think we can all reach our own conclusions. Okay.
All right, there was another question in the chat from AB. So math and English, while giving predicted grades, can old curriculum grade boundaries referred to, or just be referred to, sorry, or just grade boundary descriptors?
I think that's going to go into what we're going to talk about next, which is how you choose to award predictive. What their answer has been, particularly about English and the math HL subjects, has been that they are close enough in curriculum that the old boundaries can be used to identify that the old boundaries are going to be appropriate in awarding predicted grades.
All right, and then we had another question. So with HL subjects, when grade 3 or less is allocated, there is no scope for the candidate to showcase their performance otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, that's really what we're going to talk about next, is how do you get around that? How can you ask for an exemption?
All right, and then the last question before we move on is just to clarify. So even if you're in the exam route, predicted grades, the allocation still applies.
The allocation still applies, and the reason for that is that if something were to change and you were basically, the way they communicated which route you're on is, if you think you're going to give exams, then say you're going to give exams. But if something happens and you can't, it's easier to drop down to the hybrid model than to go back to the exam model. So if you're in the exam model, follow all these directions, do what IB says. But if you're able to give exams, the allocation's still going to matter, but your score is going to be awarded based upon the exam result. If you're not able to give exams, then you fall into this like 60-40 breakdown of internal assessment versus predicted grade. Okay, so let's kind of move on. Regardless of the exam scenario at your school, IB clearly communicated the significance and value of predicted grades. So what can we do now? The first thing that you need to do is to understand the history of your predicted grade alignment to IB scores. Because to be able to make arguments about these allocations and ask for exemptions, you're going to have to be able to make arguments why the allocation does not apply. And to do that, you're going to have to understand your own past performance. First, you need the data. In IBIS, IB provides detailed results for past exam sessions. The data is difficult to manipulate in ways that provide teachers and leaders with detailed information. It's just hard to manage. There are 3 data files. There's a subject result CSV, a candidate result CSV, and a component result CSV. CSV stands for comma separated value. They look like large Excel sheets. You need all 3 because each one has different components that will help you understand how your scores are reached. How do you turn that data into information that's usable for your faculty? The data IB provides is not in a user-friendly format. Sorry, it just isn't. We take those data files and turn them into a visualization that empowers teachers to understand how scores are achieved, and that's kind of what we do. So the examples I'm going to use now are going to be from that visualization. So again, the first question goes, understanding your predicted grade alignment to IB scores. And again, what I'm about to show you is our visualization tool to help do that. So let's start over here. Test summary. I'm a history teacher. So I'm going to go to history because that's how it rolls. And I'm going to go to go to 2019. Sean, did you lose me?
Yeah, we lost your screen share, I think.
Hold on, I don't know what happened. Oh, I have to be host again, sorry. Sorry about this, technical difficulties. Can you make me host, Sean?
There you go. You should be able to share now.
Okay, thank you. There we go. Sorry about that. Okay, so what I want to do is look at this graph down here in the lower left corner. What this is these are the predicted grades, or these are the grades that received, and this is the average of variance for those grades. So what we're looking at here is the goal is not to be perfect, but the goal is to be within about 0.5 plus or minus. Generally speaking, graphs tend to look like this because we tend not to really predict low. So it's those twos that we don't really like to predict. But keeping your predicted grade variance within about 0.5 plus or minus means you're generally in alignment with IB expectations. Let me give you another example from a different subject. I'm going to go to design and tech. What you do not want to see is predicted grades extremely out of alignment. Because if you're predicting, in this case, between a grade or grade and a half too high, that's going to lead to those allocations being lower than you would expect. The other way to look at this, and this is a scatter plot, where the predicted grade across here is the bottom. On this side is the actual exam grade. So in this subject, one student was predicted at a 7, but got an exam grade of 6. 3 students were predicted at 7 and got an exam grade of 5. 2 students were predicted at 7 and got an exam grade of 4. Now, the reason why we want to look at this is because now when we're being asked to allocate predictives, and remember, in my example, currently I only have 1 7 to allocate. I need to have a better understanding of how students actually achieve scores to bring my predictions into better alignment with IB and to be fairer to my students. So let's take a moment and click on that bubble. These are the 2 students that were predicted at a 7 and earn an exam grade of 4. I always say teachers teach students, not numbers. So if you go over here to this tab, populate, and look at student 1212, if you use this, you actually have student names. You can see that the student scored what was in essence a 4 on the practical work, which is the internal assessment, a 4 on paper 2, and a 3 on paper 1. I would argue that this teacher needs to reflect on why they would have predicted at a 7 when the practical work, which was the internal assessment, was only a 4. And it's only through understanding these kinds of examples that is going to help teachers be able to use those allotments more effectively, but also to ask for exceptions in a strategic fashion. Let me give you another example. Back to history for a minute. There we go. What you want to see is the examples of students predicted at a 6 who earned a 6. You want to be able to look at those students and understand exactly why they were able to earn that 6. Because again, we want to be fair to our students in using those allotments to most accurately predict scores. So the first thing you're going to need to do is understand, whoops, sorry about that. Excuse me. First thing you're going to have to understand is your history of predicted grades and are they in alignment with IB. The second thing you're going to need to understand are your outliers. The outliers are these bubbles that are either way up here in the top left, or if there were any down here in the bottom right. If they're down in the bottom right, that means you're predicting high and they're scoring low. If they're up here, you're predicting low and scoring high. So for example, I have 3 students who were predicted at a 4 and actually earned a 6. So in this current situation, I need to understand clearly, why was I predicting these students at a 4 and they were outperforming that prediction by a substantial amount? So I want to be able to go look at those students. In this case, I'm going to look for student 1321. There we go. And I want to figure out why that student was predicted at a 4, but scored so high. In this case, the internal assessment was a 4. I can see where that prediction might have come from, but the exam performance of a paper 1-6, a paper 3-7, and a paper 2-5 is how they outperform that prediction. But in order to use my allotment fairly, I need to understand, first, I need to understand my allotments. And second, I need to understand my outliers. Because to understand that process is going to allow me to understand how kids achieve scores better and therefore be able to predict more accurately. Okay. So understand your outliers. Third thing that we need to do is to reflect on our practice. How have we been awarding predicted grades? As I began with, we need to shift from applying generous or conservative predicted grades to trying to provide accurate predicted grades that are truly indicative of what a student knows and can do. You need to consider, how does your predicted grade align with your course grade? Is your course grade in some alignment to how they're going to score on the exam? You should not, the idea here is students should not be getting an A if you're going to be predicting a 4. there needs to be some consideration that what you're using to award course grades is in alignment with IB practices. Consider a standard-based grading model that brings course grades, predicted grades, and IB scores into alignment. The ability to predict accurately is going to be better is if your course grades align more clearly with IB expectations. Okay. Pause for questions.
All right, so and there was one question in the chat, was just when grading your IAs, how do you know if it's going to be a 3, 4, 5, etc.?
Okay, so you need to, let me do that one. Okay, hold on for that. You need to understand the grade boundaries. So if you look at it, basically these are the grade boundaries of the internal assessments from previous years based upon the rubric. So you basically needed to have a 20 to have an IA that was equivalent to a 7. You need to have at least a 16 for an IA to be considered a 6. These boundaries can be found in 2 places. Number 1, they can be found within IBIS. And number 2, you can reproduce them yourself, which is how we do this, is we reconstruct the boundaries. But those boundaries are extremely important to understand because that links your rubric to that kind of out of 7 performance.
All right, thank you. And then Marcin, I think you've got your hand raised. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So the last point mentioned, making our course standards alignment with the IB grades. I don't remember the exact wording on the slide. How do we get there? How do we get the course more aligned with the IB grades that we're looking for?
Well, really kind of the way it kind of works is this. It kind of works if you go backwards out of it. Let me go ahead and do this. This is the breakdown of component information, and these are the rubric numbers. So if you look at it, these are this 12.79. The IB history internal assessment rubric, I believe, is out of 24. So that's the average of that performance. But what you can see we break down here is we break it down by cohorts, students who earned a 6, students who earned a 5, students who earned a 4. And so what you do is basically say to get, and the way I kind of look at it is I take the 7 and 1 off the table because 7 is kind of super genius and 1 is a inverse of super genius. So I take those off the table and say a 6 should be, in my world, equivalent to kind of like an A. So I'm going to use those rubric numbers as the identifiers for A performance. And then a 5 is kind of like a B. And I'm going to use those rubric numbers to identify B performance, and so on and so forth. So the idea being, it's not a mathematical grade, it's more of like a rubric style grade. You're not going to use it mathematically, you're not going to average scores. So my goal is if a kid walks in to my classroom at the beginning of the year, hopefully they'll be walking in soon, at the beginning of the year, that they're performing at a 4 level, I kind of want to coach them up to a 5 or 6. And the way you do that is kind of understand kind of how those rubrics work to figure out a score.
All right, thanks. Michelle, you've got your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I am trying to, this is my first year teaching seniors and grading IAs and predicted grades. So I'm a little bit lost. You said we could find the internal assessment breakdown. I have the rubric, but the breakdown you said is on IBIS. I'm not familiar with that platform.
If you ask your coordinator to go into IBIS and give you the grade boundaries for the internal assessment for your subject, they should be able to produce that for you.
Okay, so it's IBIS grade boundaries for the internal assessment.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Tim, another question came in through the chat just about where do we find the allocations in IBIS? Like, do you know what tab they are under?
It's under the predicted grade entry tab.
All right, thank you. I think
Okay.
that's all the questions that we've got right now.
Okay, cool. So then we go back over here, go to here. And Sean, it's you.
All right, excellent. So, again, we want to thank you for joining us today. Part of the reason that we did this was that we wanted you to be able to support and empower your faculty, with to accurately predict student performance on the IB assessment. And part of that is we'd like to partner with you through that process. So, a couple of things that we offer to help do that is one of the things you saw today. So Tim was showing you that dynamic data visualization tool. And we currently offer free coaching to schools that receive a 5-year analysis of the IB DP student performance. So this coaching basically prepares DP coordinators, administrators, and teachers, teacher leaders to share insight with their faculty and then really use that data to facilitate change. Additionally, we offer paradigm shifting professional development to uncover what's often considered almost like a black box of IB exam assessment results for the entire DP team. So schools find this PD really to be a game changer as it uncovers exactly how DP assessment components lead to the results at the student level. And that allows teachers to either refocus curriculum and assessment or decide, pieces that they might need to focus a little bit less on depending on what the results show. And then finally, we offer support to groups of specific subjects and specific teaching teams. This support has been described as the best IB focused PD teachers have ever received from the past couple of times that we've done it at schools. And so this is because what we do is we basically collaborate with leading examiners and PD leaders to dig deep into the actual student performance at your school. And what we do is we go through and we read graded IAs and exam papers, and then design school-specific PD focused on observed patterns in your student learning. So there's that analysis piece, and then we kind of customize the PD to your specific needs. And so we're currently offering that support in IB Lang and Lit, IB History, IB Psychology, Business, Economics, Biology, all maths, and TOK. If you're interested in any of those services, you can always contact us at info@ibschoolimprovement.com. Our webpage is www.ibschoolimprovement.com. And again, we're also on Facebook and Twitter, so our links are there. Please help us get the word out. Really, again, we wanted to do this free webinar to help out the community as much as possible, and we're really just trying to help as many people through this because it's, a lot of what we talked about today is extremely confusing as the information continues to roll out, and we don't want people to be left in the dark. We want to be able to help out where we can. So, again, thank you for coming today. And we're going to stick around for a couple minutes to answer any questions. But other than that, this concludes the formal session. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to either raise your hand or ask them in the chat or unmute and ask us. But thank you once again for coming today. Hope you have a great day.